Well, hi there, everybody. And, oh, wait, we don't have a mic. Hello, everyone. Losing audio. Oh, there we go. There we go. Check 1, 2. There we go. Okay. Yes, we are going. We have audio. Good, good. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dome at Home. It's the last Thursday of the month, and so it's great to be here with all of you. Seeing everyone say hello in the chat. Nice to see you all joining us. It's been kind of it's been a weird year, really, but it's been a weird week for me, a weird month. Today, of course, has been kind of crazy as well. If you've been watching the news, if it's clear where you are in Canada, you probably have a nice red sunset tonight because of all the smoke in the air, but that's the byproduct of all the forest fires that are raging. Northern Manitoba is on fire, of course, all throughout Alberta. We just heard about Jasper today. Seeing some of the footage coming in from there is just horrifying. Such a devastating loss. I've been to Jasper a couple of times with my late wife and early in our relationship, we went there, and it's just so sad to see the results of these increased wildfires and things like that. So, it's kind of hard to switch gears from all of that and look at fun things and cool space stuff. But we're going to try because the universe is out there and goes on. And I think the more that we appreciate the universe and the more that we, pay attention to the sky and the stars and things like that, it makes us also a little bit more, a little bit more familiar with the environmental issues and things like that, and a little bit more supportive of the natural environment. So anyway, quite a day. Oh, hey, Dustin, nice to see you. Haven't seen you for a while. We have to hook up and have some coffee. Kim is here as well. Great. Wonderful. Nice to see you guys. Is Kevin out there with you in Ontario land? And stands out in Gimli. Tara's here. Craig just points out Jasper had a great dark sky preserve. Yes. Dark sky preserves are something that we've had to do because of what's called light pollution. I mean, if you live in the city, you know that light pollution makes it hard to see the stars. And so when you go to a place like, Jasper National Park or any kind of place like that, you wind up still having local lights as an issue, because often there'll be a campground, and in your campground, they'll have a single 1 billion watt light bulb on the top of a pole that just lights up everything for miles around, and you still can't see the stars. So there's basically a certification program now. The International Dark Sky Association worldwide, and here in Canada, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, certify places as dark sky reserves or preserves. There's a couple of different qualifying things where people can go and see the stars. And it is a wonderful program. There's one here in Manitoba, the Spruce Woods Provincial Park has a dark sky preserve in it, and there's a couple of more perhaps in the works. And I know this is something that is sort of catching on with a lot of natural areas and parks and things like that. It's another way to sort of connect people with the natural environment, because the starry sky is such a part of that. So and Phil, nice to see you. Grand Canyon is a 95% of a dark sky preserve. Yes, and we're going to see some of Phil's pictures from that dark sky preserve. He sent me, he had a vacation out that way, and we're going to actually, I think we'll start with those right away. Why don't we jump into that? Because that's a perfect segue, Phil. So the Grand Canyon, not just a beautiful place during the day, but has dark skies. And rules so that a developer can't just come in and put up a whole bunch of floodlights or billboards or things like that. There's all sorts of regulations. And that means you get to see stuff like this at night. Here's a great shot of the Milky Way that Phil took with his phone. And the center of the Milky Way is right in about there. That's where the black hole is. And you can see this is the Lagoon Nebula, a little place where stars are being formed. There's all the Milky Way, the core of it here with the dark dust lanes in it. This is Scorpius, the constellation. We can't see all the way down to the tail very easily from here in Canada, but you go a little bit farther south, you get a better view. The bright star Antares here, a red giant star that is quite an impressive star. We just don't get a great view of it. And so we have a couple of shots here. There's, I think somebody's using a green laser pointer there. I think that's what that beam is. Is that right, Phil? Green laser pointers can actually work like a planetarium pointer in the real sky, and you can use it to point things out and so on. We'll occasionally use them, but for astronomy events, but you're not supposed to use them around airports or things like that. So anyway, there's more of the Milky Way as it rises there. You're getting more of the spiral arm, and just a beautiful, beautiful view. Looking the other way, we've got this great shot of, there's the Big Dipper right here, and the North Star would be just, I guess, right over, actually just out of the frame, I guess, probably out right about behind my back there, right about there. But look how close it is to the ground. Down in the Grand Canyon, the Big Dipper will set below the horizon and disappear. Here in Canada, it's what we call circumpolar, which means it circles around the pole star, but it never goes below the horizon. So as you go farther south, those things change. And you don't even have to go all the way to the Grand Canyon. When I was in Halifax, which is only about 45 degrees latitude, which is 5 degrees different from where I am here at almost 50 in Winnipeg, it's noticeably different. Things look noticeably out of right. They're just not where they're supposed to be. Further proof that yes, the Earth is round. I don't know what's going on here. It looks like there's some kind of rave happening, but obviously the red light's there to allow people to still see the stars while you're using telescopes. It looks like a great time, Phil, and I'm glad you had the chance to do that. If you do have a chance to get to a dark sky preserve, or even just a campground or some place that doesn't have a lot of lights, it's definitely worth the view, because the things that you can see with your eyes, I mean, yeah, it's great to do that with your telescope or your binoculars or your camera, things like that. But the view that you get with your eyes when you're seeing the whole sky full of not just a few dozen stars, but literally thousands of stars is mind-blowing. Definitely, definitely worth it. Okay, so today I was going to start a brand new segment, and we weren't able to get it. Actually, we were going to have two special things today. We were going to have a brand new segment starting. It's one called Connect the Dots. And I even got our good friend of the show, Mike Jensen, to give me another vocal stinger so that I could have a nice little title sequence like we do for cool space stuff. And I think I'll have to call Sebastian and Genevieve. Maybe we can get some another piece of music for that. Anyway, unfortunately, this week and this month has just been so crazy. We're moving office spaces at the museum right now, and there's some office renovations going, and I just wasn't able to get it ready. So we're going to do the content of it, but I won't have the full Connect the Dots theme ready to go. So that will come at one of our future kinds of shows. Let me just check the chat here. I'm using a different chat monitoring here, and so I'm just making sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to, because I don't want to miss any of the good messages. And yeah, it's not covering all of them, so. Okay. Anyway, let us switch over to our good friend Stellarium, the free software program that I use as a virtual planetarium for the show here. And I mean, the summer skies, the problem with summer is that it doesn't get dark until late. The idea that the sun sets and then the stars come out, that's great, but it really doesn't happen until, I mean, I'm not I don't feel like it's dark till about 10:30 or 11 o'clock right now. It was worse last month, but we're still in a point where it's really hard to see constellations early. That's again due to our northerly latitude. You folks all the way down in southern Ontario, Kevin and Kim, you have that southerly latitude really gives you a better view there. But yeah, having the dark skies really helps. It's really cut into my observing because I can only stay up so late, and so if I can't really start doing things until 11 o'clock, I turn into a pumpkin fairly soon thereafter. However, off in the west, we do have the stars that we are familiar with. We've been watching for a while. We've got Boötes with the bright star Arcturus here. Looks kind of like an ice cream cone. And then right next to it, we'll zoom in here. Oh, and I see we need to turn on our constellations and turn off our asteroids. There we go. Right next to it, Corona Borealis. The news of the blaze star T Corona Borealis, that star in Corona Borealis that is expected to go nova sometime this summer, has really taken off. I've seen it all over the internet, and you can see it. There are segments on TV. It was on CBC radio across the country this week. It's kind of getting overhyped. I mean, it's really, really cool for astronomers, but it's not going to be like the Star of Bethlehem blazing forth and being visible in the daytime or things like that. From a strictly visual point of view, there will be one more star in the sky among the several thousand that you can see. But for folks like us that are interested in astronomy, that follow the sky, that spend some time with the sky, it's kind of a big deal, but I'm worried that it's getting overhyped. So definitely it's something for us to watch for. And we did a whole segment on it in the last episode. So if you want to go back to our YouTube channel, all of the shows are archived there, and you can watch that. We will go live when it explodes, whether it's daytime or nighttime, but it's really hard to know when it will happen. And if it happens this summer, I'm already having nights where it's completely clear according to the weather, but the smoke is so thick that you can't see any stars. So again, the effects of climate change on astronomy as well as on everything else. Right next to Corona Borealis is a constellation called Hercules, and Hercules has a great globular cluster in it called M13. Now, it's a wonderful object to see in binoculars, and so I had hoped to get our binocular expert Ulrike Schreckenbach on the show today to talk about it, and I managed to basically drop the ball until it was too late to make that happen for this show. So we are going to talk about M13 and the globular star cluster hopefully next month, and I'm really working hard. I know everybody enjoys Ulrike's segments on binocular astronomy, and if I can get my act together, we'll get her back on the show. So hopefully that will come up soon, and definitely something to watch for. I think my favorite summer constellation, though, is the one next to Hercules. It's this tiny little group that kind of looks like, well, it looks kind of like a fish with a tail. If you connected this little triangle with the red lines as well, it would kind of look like a kid's drawing of a fish, or, well, my drawing of a fish. That's how I draw them too. This is Lyra the Harp, and it contains the bright star Vega, one of the brightest stars in the northern hemisphere. So it's like one of the first stars you see at night. It's a beacon of the summer. It's one of the 3 stars in the summer triangle, but the constellation of it near Vega sometimes gets overlooked. This is our feature for this month's Connect the Dots. And the goal of Connect the Dots is to sort of look at the constellation and see what kinds of things are in it to observe, and also hear a little bit about the lore, the history, and so on. Lyra, the harp, is supposed to be, if you listen to the Romans and Greeks who give many of our official constellation tales, it's the harp of Orpheus, who was essentially the inventor of music. And so his harp is immortalized up there because, the harp has become the most ubiquitous musical instrument in all of history, and like you hear it on the radio all the time, and I mean, stringed instruments obviously have progressed a little bit since the old school harp, but Lyra really is a wonderful constellation. You can fit most of it in binoculars, which is kind of cool. So it's one of the few constellations where, with just one little overlap, maybe you can see pretty much the entire constellation and get a good view of it. Everything else, the other constellations, are just way too big. If you're using binoculars, there's a couple of really interesting star groups in here. First of all, Vega. If you watch the movie Contact, I haven't seen the new one yet, but the Jodie Foster one, Vega is where the aliens came from. So that's kind of interesting. And it's a pure white star. It basically sets the standard for colors in astronomy. So if you look at Vega, that's your white balance. If you're setting up your camera, that's your definition of a white star. And then there are stars that are, more yellow or more orange or red on one side of the color, and then on the other side they become a little bit more bluish. But Vega is right there in the middle. Tiffany, there's a new Contact. Yeah, isn't Contact being redone? Or am I thinking of something else? I thought that it was being redone. I'm positive I just saw, maybe it was an internet thing, who knows. But I was positive that they were redoing Contact because a bunch of people were saying, oh, I'm going to watch the old one again. Anyway, maybe someone can fact check me. Real-time fact checking is very important, so please feel free to do that and drop it in the chat if you know more. Right next to Vega, in the other side of the tail of the fish, you'll notice that this star looks kind of oval. And that's just because of the way the stars are plotted on a computer program. Brighter stars are bigger. And so when you have two stars very close together that overlap, you wind up with an oval. But if we zoom right in here, there's actually two stars separated by just a little bit. The two stars, you can split them in binoculars. You can see them as two separate stars. I can't do it with the unaided eye. It's pretty difficult to be able to do that. But it turns out that in a telescope, each of those two stars is also a double star. So this is a quadruple star system. It's called the double-double because in a small instrument, it's a double, but then in a larger telescope, both of them are split into two stars. So this is one of the easiest to view double stars or multiple stars. And it's a reminder that maybe half of the stars that are out there aren't individual suns like ours with a planetary system around them. They're multiple star systems, doubles, triples, quadruples, sextuples. There's, I believe there's one 7-star system. Let's see. Melissa says they're redoing Tron. Oh, that's cool. That one I didn't know about. Vancouver, lots of filming stuff going on there. We've got a lot of filming in Winnipeg right now as well. They shot another Hallmark movie in our museum and planetarium, so that was an interesting 24-hour shift. Lots of movie stuff. Anyway, I digress. The double star, the double-double, a great target for pretty much any instrument in the constellation of Lyra. Now, there's another double star in Lyra. Down over here, there's actually two stars. They're quite far apart, but to the unaided eye, they look like a double. And so when all the stars were being named, you've got bright stars like Vega get a official name like Vega, a fancy name, but most stars just get a letter or a serial number. So the brightest star in a constellation is usually called Alpha Lyra. That's the first letter of the Greek alphabet. And then the second star is called Beta, and then Gamma, and so on. So the brighter stars are given those. And then once you run out of Greek letters, you just go to numbers. And once you get into the really, really faint stars, they just get serial numbers based on their position. But when they were going through that with Lyra, they kind of didn't follow that pattern. It made more sense, for example, even though these two stars are not in order of brightness, they were called Delta 1 and Delta 2 Lyrae. So you've got Delta 1 and Delta 2, again, a nice little double star up near the top of Lyra. The highlight of Lyra, though, And this is for telescope viewers because it's a little bit too small to get anything out of in binoculars unless you got really, really big ones, is the Ring Nebula. It's also called M57. M57 means it's the 57th entry in Charles Messier's catalog of this isn't a comet. He was keeping a list of all the things that weren't comets because he was trying to discover comets because you actually got money for that. And these weren't comets because they didn't move around. So M57, his 57th entry, is one of the most beautiful objects in the entire sky. I'm just going to turn off the labels here so that we don't have that right in the middle. The Ring Nebula, obvious where its name comes from. It is, even in a small telescope, you can see it as a ring with a darker center. You don't see the colors visually in a telescope. That shows up just in the view here of, with a camera. But this is an amazing object in almost any instrument. It's something that I will always show people if I have a telescope out and it's up in the sky. It's what our sun will look like after our sun runs out of fuel. As you've probably heard, the sun will eventually run out of fuel 5 billion years from now or something like that. A whole bunch of things happen before that. It'll swell up into a red giant star, but eventually it winds up running out of fuel. The outer layers of the red giant star puff off in this sort of gas bubble, essentially, and all that's left behind is a white dwarf, which is the slowly cooling core of a star. It's no longer burning. It's just sort of got the residual heat of having just come out of the oven, essentially, and it just stays there, still shining, very, very small, and slowly cooling off. That's what the sun will become. This is the white dwarf in the center of the Ring Nebula, and this is the outer layers of the red giant star that have sort of puffed off, and they're glowing because they were hot to begin with, and the white dwarf is energizing them and causing them to fluoresce. So you get this beautiful object. My favorite, really, really amazing. When you look at it up close, I mean, here the picture doesn't do it justice, but Hubble took some images where it just shows sort of this section of the Ring Nebula and the detail in here of all the shadows being cast by blobs of gas, and then the shadows from the light from the white dwarf and things like that. Just really, really beautiful. Ulrika is pointing out they tried M57 with 20 by 80 binoculars. No luck so far. Yeah, I have spotted it in 80 millimeter binoculars. I think they were 11 by 80s that I was using. I've spotted it, but it's so small that it's really easy to just not see it because it doesn't seem much bigger than a star in binoculars, but it's much fainter and much more diffuse. It just sort of blends into the background. So I pretty much had to get the binoculars in the right spot on a tripod and sort of hold them there. And then when you tap the binoculars, they shake a little bit, and that our eyes pick up the motion of things, and that's when I was able to see it in binoculars. It is a real challenge object for binoculars for sure. But a small telescope, like I've seen it in my 60 millimeter first telescope as well. So that's smaller than your binoculars. So hopefully you'll be able to track it down. But again, really dark skies, and the smoke is not going to make it easy either. So definitely check out the Ring Nebula. It is sort of a glimpse into the future of the sun. And this is how we understand some of the things that we think we know about what's going to happen in the future. We see examples of stars in all different parts of their life cycles, and we understand, or mostly understand, the nuclear fusion that's going on inside and how the periodic table of the elements works and things like that. And basically by taking those two things and putting them together, we can figure out where all these weird objects fit in the timeline of the life of a star. So that's what I kind of like about the Ring Nebula as well. It's the end part of the life of a star. Now, there is one more object in Lyra that I'm going to mention. It's not, I always think of it as being in neighboring Cygnus because the way the constellation boundaries work, this is the constellation of Lyra, this area here. It's kind of like a province in the sky. And something over here, this is part of Cygnus over next door, the Northern Cross. So if there's an object right on this border, to me it feels like it's part of Cygnus rather than part of Lyra. But officially, this object is part of Lyra, and it's M56, which is the previous object in the Messier catalog, and it's right over here. Right, basically the two, the nose of the fish, I guess, and the other star here point pretty much to it, and it's a little bit more than halfway to the end of the star in Cygnus. That when you start trying to figure out how to find these things in the sky, you come up with all sorts of ways to sort of hop from these stars point to that and so on. And that's one of the ways that I find M56. It's what's called a globular star cluster. It's a cluster of a few 100,000 stars that is outside the Milky Way galaxy, still part of it, orbiting around, but it's outside the spiral section. And it is a beautiful little cluster of stars. Not as nice as the one in Hercules, which is sort of the big standard, but still a very, very nice object in a telescope. And these are some of the oldest stars that are out there. They're stars that, some stars burn bright and explode. Other stars are sort of more on a slow burn. These stars have been going for a very, very long time. So they're some of the oldest stars that we're able to observe. And as you'll see in one of our later segments, there's some cool things happening near the middle of these. So this is definitely worth tracking down. It's often overlooked because it's right next to, it's right next to the Ring Nebula. And so if you can look at the Ring Nebula, why look at anything else, I think is sort of it. But definitely check it out. There are a couple of other objects in the constellation of Lyra. We won't get into all of them because there's a whole bunch of, literally, depending on how big your telescope is, there's an endless number of things to look at. Stellarium is a great reference for this. I like to just basically make a chart like this of what I'm going to look at that night, and then just press print and bring it outside with me. And then I can use my red flashlight to look at it and track down some of these objects. There's so many things to see. And so we'll be taking a look at other constellations in future as part of this new sequence of Connect the Dots. Let me see. I had another thing that I wanted to get to before we went to... Oh, yes. So here's a little bit of a shameless plug. It's time for the planetarium shows. The planetarium is running programs daily, and so our feature show right now is Forward to the Moon, narrated by Carrie Byron from Mythbusters, and it's all about the idea of exploring the moon, why, how, who's going, and what it's leading to. This is not a field trip to pick up some rocks and put a check mark. This is a more like the International Space Station. That was a program to stay in space for extended times, to expand our horizon out beyond the surface of the Earth. And so is the future of lunar exploration. So that's a really great show. It's on daily. Please come and see it if you haven't. And I'd love to hear your comments on it. We're going to be doing some updates to it because things are changing even now as things go on. I think it's time.
Cool space stuff.
I almost made today just a cool space stuff show because there has been so much stuff happening. Most of it is cool. Some of it's a little, just sort of updates and things like that. But most of it is pretty cool. And I decided we'd try and do a regular show. So this show might run a little bit long. If you need to leave, that's totally fine. I get it. But anyway, let's see. I missed a couple of comments here. Oh, Lou, nice to see you. Mosquitoes. Yes. Mosquitoes are the bane of observers. I've tried everything. My mom swears by burning coffee grounds. That's the latest Instagram fad of how to keep bugs away. It seemed to work about as good as anything else. And it's probably, I don't know about you, but I generate a lot of coffee grounds in my house. So that's certainly something worth doing. I've got some of those thermocell things as well. That is also a way to try and keep mosquitoes around. The other thing that works really well, if you're sitting at your telescope, for example, a fan, if you put a fan blowing right on you, it's hard for them to fly through that and get on you. That's what I like to do, but I like it cool. I don't like the heat, so maybe that doesn't work for everybody. But something worth trying. I even know people that have tried those beekeeping hats and things like that. It's hard to look through those. So if anybody does find the perfect astronomer's solution to mosquitoes, let me know, because I would be all over that. All right, cool space stuff. As you know, the Boeing Starliner went up on its first test flight with humans aboard. 2 pilots went up to the International Space Station. They had some technical issues on the way up that didn't seem to be all that bad. I mean, they were still able to dock with the space station and all of that. But all of the issues were with the bottom part of the spacecraft, what's called the service module, and particularly these dog houses, as they call them. The dog houses are where the thrusters are that it uses to maneuver around and come in for docking, and also to reorient itself for landing and stuff like that. So they're pretty important. That part does not come back to Earth. It burns up in the atmosphere. All that comes back is the crew in the gray part, this conical capsule. So they can't just come home and see what the problems were. They actually have to stay on the space station to do all of that testing. And so they've been doing, there was a press conference just this morning where they sort of updated us on what the plan is. Well, they have not announced a time when they're coming home yet. The Starliner and its 2 crew are going to stay on the space station and continue as part of, as they like to call it, Expedition 71 Plus. 71 is the expedition that's up there right now, which has 7 crew members, and now there's 2 extras basically doing some work there, Sonny Williams and Butch as well. But they're going to be doing some thruster firings and tests and things like that. They might extend the crew. They were supposed to go up for a 10-day mission. They're up over 30 days now, and they may get extended. It was hard to tell from the comments either to 45 days or another 45 days, but they basically said that the situation is cleared. They could come back. They don't have to come back until September if they don't want to. I think the astronauts might want to come home if they thought this was a 10-day trip away from their family and suddenly they're gone for 3 months. But still, it's nice to know that it's not so much like a safety issue as we'll just do all of this testing while we can. It's kind of an inconvenience to the crew, although getting delayed, if you're going to get delayed in an airport, the International Space Station is a pretty good one to hang out in, I think. So that's not too bad. So we'll see what happens with that. I really hope that the Starliner is able to join the number of spacecraft that can bring humans to and from the space station, because only having a couple of options isn't great. Russia has the Soyuz spacecraft, but it's quite cramped, and they have 2 astronauts going up and down every time. So there's really only room for 1 person on a regular basis. And then there's the Dragon spacecraft that SpaceX runs. Now SpaceX just got the nod that they're going to be the ones to build the thing that brings the space station down. In 2031, the plan is to bring the space station down to burn up in the atmosphere, and the pieces will fall down into the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, far from land. It might sound silly, but ultimately you've got some modules that have already been up there for 25 years, and you just can't leave things in space forever without them deteriorating. And the problem is, if you get a little rust on your car here on Earth, you can cover it up with some paint or buff it out. But I mean, if corrosion gets through the space station, all the air leaks out. So it's just not something that they can extend indefinitely. So they're going to be working on that. It's based on their Dragon spacecraft, which is the one that carries cargo up to the space station, and then a modified version carries the crew up there. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. I don't know if you saw this picture. This is called the Penguin and Egg, and you can probably see where that comes from. These are, well, there's a whole bunch of galaxies, but the picture is of 2 galaxies. This is a galaxy over here, and this is a galaxy over here that has been basically torn apart by the gravity of the larger galaxy. This was probably a spiral galaxy at some point, and as the galaxies moved through space, it basically got too close to this one. and the gravity started tearing the smaller galaxy apart, and it just looks like a penguin. Here's the beak and the eye and the body, and then here's the egg on the ground, so it's like a penguin and an egg. Beautiful picture, and this was released to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of JWST working. That's amazing. 2 years already. And it was longer than that from when it was launched. It launched on Christmas Day more than a couple, 2.5 years ago. So pretty amazing. I see a question from Chris on the Perseids. We're going to talk about the Perseids after this. So yes, we will get to that for sure. Let me see. And Tiffany tracked down the Contact. Yeah, remaking Contact with Jennifer Lawrence. See, I wasn't going crazy in this particular instance. Yeah, the penguin, I mean, when I saw this, I didn't see what they were talking about for some reason for about 4 or 5 seconds, and now I can't unsee it. It totally looks like a penguin to me. JWST just sending out amazing results. A lot of the Canadian stuff isn't getting this kind of release because the instrument that we designed is not a pretty pictures camera. It's a analyzing starlight camera. And so it's, detecting the atmospheres of exoplanets and determining if they could harbor life and that kind of stuff. But they just don't have cool pictures of penguins like this. So the Canadian side of things is very exciting, but it's also just not something that is as easily impressive. So it's kind of too bad. Not to be outdone, the Hubble Space Telescope took a picture of a globular cluster. This is the globular cluster Omega Centauri. You can tell from its name Omega, it got named as a star. It's bright enough that you can see it with the unaided eye. The problem is it's in the constellation of Centaurus, which you need to be in the southern hemisphere to see. And it's not a star, it's about a million stars altogether. Hubble has found evidence by watching what's going on in the center of this cluster that there's a black hole in the center. Now this is kind of cool because we know how black holes are formed from individual stars. Stars have to be bigger than the sun. Betelgeuse could potentially, after it goes supernova, it could turn into a black hole. And we understand that there are supermassive black holes at the center of whole galaxies where there's so many stars that have, collapsed or died or something that there's these giant, these giant black holes in the center of them. But are there black holes that are sort of in the middle? Are there black holes that are bigger than single star ones, but not as big as supermassive ones? There should be, but we hadn't really found evidence of them. And so finding them helps us understand how this happens. Do supermassive black holes basically grow from a whole bunch of individual star-sized black holes merging, or do they form in some other way altogether? Well, finding these intermediate mass black holes kind of says, well, maybe they can just grow from small to big, which on the surface seems pretty intuitive. But if you walked into a mall and you only saw 6-year-olds and 90-year-olds, and you didn't see anybody in between, you'd kind of wonder, if you were an alien and didn't understand, how humans worked, you'd kind of wonder how people got from these small little sizes to the the seniors. Now we've found the millennials of the black hole spectrum, I guess. And on top of all that, this is just a stunning picture. This is what it feels like when you look at a globular cluster in a nice big telescope. Again, the colors here are enhanced, but just a beautiful, beautiful field of stars. Now imagine if you lived in a planet going around one of these stars. You would never have night. Like you would have so many suns in your sky relatively close that it would never get dark. You would never see, or you would never know that there was a universe beyond your star cluster. Just like for a long time, we didn't know that there was a universe beyond the Milky Way galaxy because we couldn't see any of it. It's amazing where you grow up really affects your perspective on the rest of the world. Let's see, here's another one. The Europeans have built the Ariane 6, which is a big, big rocket to launch big, big things. And it had its first flight, and like every test flight, there were a few glitches. It mostly worked. It didn't explode. It got up into space. Not all of the things worked at the very end of the flight, but mostly a success. At least they're going to, the next launch will hopefully be a little bit more successful. But it's nice to see that there's, it's not all American companies that are doing all of the space flight. There's obviously many national corporations, but this is a conglomerate of the European Space Agency and a number of companies in Europe. So it's nice to see them joining the club. Here's the SpaceX update. We were saying, it'd be nice to have Starliner joining the crew because we've got Soyuz and we've got SpaceX's Falcon. Well, Falcon, the rocket, is grounded because basically on the way up to put some Starlink satellites in orbit, it had a big leak and all of the liquid or oxygen leaked out and formed all of this ice. It was actually beautiful video to watch. You could see big chunks of ice falling off and then drifting past the engine bell and then getting disintegrated from the invisible plasma of the rocket exhaust. Really beautiful to watch from a visual point of view. Engineering wise, total disaster. This is the same rocket that takes people to the space station. And so, when Starliner was stuck up there, the Boeing folks are saying, well, we're not stranded, but all the SpaceX fans were saying, oh, well, we can just launch a Dragon to go up and rescue your crew and stuff like that. That way you don't have to take the risk. Well, now they can't. So right now we have the Boeing Starliner spacecraft staying at the space station to do all these tests. We have the SpaceX spacecraft grounded because of this rocket problem, because they use the same rocket. And then the Soyuz only has that one seat. This is why you want to have more than one option in the various spacecraft. When you've got people living in space full time, you can't leave it to one system. And while Boeing has had its problems developing the Starliner, they worked in a very different world than a new and innovative company like SpaceX. We still need to have more than one option because right now, there is no way to get new crew up to the space station the way that we were doing it before. Now, hopefully, Falcon they'll figure out what the problem was and they'll fix it and they'll be ungrounded. There is a Falcon flight coming up to exchange the crews in just a few months, actually. And that will be hopefully not impacted. But right now, I'm sure the folks on the space station, they can always get home fine, because there are craft on the space station to get them home. It's getting the next crew up there. And it's been inhabited continuously for 25 years now. And you really don't want to break that streak if you don't have to. You don't want to have to leave it mothballed and abandoned until the spacecraft are ready to catch up. So hopefully this won't be a big problem for the space station crew. So much cool space stuff. This was something that came out of nowhere. So the Curiosity rover is on Mars. It's been cruising around there for years now. It was supposed to last 90 days. It's still doing its thing, looking at rocks and making samples and all these kinds of things. It's driving around. It's about the size of an SUV. So it's pretty heavy. It's driving around. It drives over this rock, and the rock crumbles, and inside of it are all these yellow crystals. This is pure sulfur. And we found sulfur on Mars before, but not in its pure form. Normally it's mixed in with different compounds. Sulfur is a very common and important organic element, essentially. But finding pure sulfur, there's only a few ways that pure sulfur can form. Hydrothermal vents is one place where, like down at the bottom of the ocean, where you get volcanoes and things like that. So you can get those kinds of things making pure sulfur. So that's kind of intriguing. Not fully expected to find that on Mars. So this is yet another curveball of you go to a planet, you try and understand what's going there, you try and answer the questions you already have, but then you find this weird thing out of left field, and suddenly it generates a whole bunch more questions. I love this aspect of space exploration. I mean, you never know what you're going to get every time these pictures come down. Really, really cool stuff. And this isn't the latest mission. This is, a mission that's been up there for quite a long time and has been sort of faded into the background, but still churning out amazing science and fantastic pictures of of Mars as a place. There's Jeremy. Jeremy Hansen, Canadian astronaut. He's training for his lunar mission, which is scheduled to launch September 2025. He and 3 other American astronauts will fly around the moon on Artemis 2. Part of your training, and this is, to be honest, I never really thought about this. You always think about, they're doing training where they go underwater for spacewalks, and they're doing training, physical fitness, and they're doing training on the science and stuff like that. On launch day, they strap you into the rocket and you have to lie there for 5 hours before you actually go into space. So that's one of the least glamorous, but easiest to simulate training. You don't need an expensive simulator. You could basically just do this in your living room with a chair. Go lie on your floor and put your feet up on your couch for 5 hours. That's one of the trials and tribulations that the astronauts go through on these launches here. So that's kind of cool. That's his flight surgeon there, who's the doctor who's sort of making sure this is all good. Gets to try on the suit, and I'm not sure if that's exactly what the couch looks like in the Artemis craft. I guess it probably is, but pretty interesting astronaut training. And there's his ride. It has moved to Florida. It is now at the Kennedy Space Center in the Vehicle Assembly Building, that gigantic building that they used to build all the moon rockets of the Apollo days in. I was in that when we were down for the Psyche launch. It's incredibly massive. You can see the workers at the bottom right there, so that gives you a sense of scale. This is the first stage of Artemis 2, so it's the business end for liftoff from Earth. And it'll be moved vertical into the place, attached to the 2 side solid rocket boosters, which are already ready to go. And then they put the European second stage on top and the capsule, and then they put them in there and we fly. That's coming up fast. That's pretty impressive. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of testing to go on and stuff like that, but this is a real milestone. This is really happening. A Canadian is going to the moon. And we're only about a year away from that, if everything continues as planned. This was kind of a surprise. Last week, there was a release from NASA saying, we're going to be providing an update on a space sciences mission. You should come and listen. And that was all the detail in the release that they sent to reporters. And when we got there, it turned out that they have canceled the Viper moon rover. This is basically a remote control, like a Curiosity rover, except for the moon, and its job is to find ice at the South Pole, where all of the moon missions will be landing. And the idea is to figure out where the water resources are, so that can be used to plan the future longer duration missions. The rover's done, like it's built. It has not been tested and all of that stuff yet, but it's basically ready to go. But it's way over cost and way over budget, and it's likely that it won't be ready to go when its ride is ready to go. It's riding on the Griffin lander. So they decide, and I mean, NASA took a budget cut, so something had to go. And unfortunately, the Viper mission, which had a couple of Canadian scientists working on it, is on the chopping block. If you're interested, NASA will give you this rover if you operate it at no cost to them and you pick it up. Actually, I don't know that it's 100% free, but they basically said if your expressions of interest for people who will operate this privately are welcome. So if any of you have wanted to run a mission to the moon, you'd have to get it there yourself too. So that's a bit of a problem, but certainly an opportunity for a startup company if somebody wanted to grab that. And this is an actual NASA mission. It wasn't a private one to begin with. And so it's essentially being offered as private to private companies. If that doesn't happen, then they will take the instruments off and use those on future missions. But yeah, poor Viper. It's not going to get to the moon after all. Okay. We can't not talk about Starship in cool space stuff recently. That's one of the cool things happening. Biggest rocket ever to get off the ground and not explode. And the 4th flight was last month, or I guess a bit more. We talked about it last month in our show, so it was a bit more than a month ago. Mostly successful. Some very interesting re-entry issues when the fins basically started melting off. That was a problem. But they're getting ready for their 5th test, and they're talking about, we fixed the fin melting off problem, and the goal is that the booster is supposed to go and land somewhere and be caught by these little, they call them chopsticks, these 2 little things here. So the idea is that the booster will go and land right on the launch pad where it launched from, and the little chopsticks will grab it so it doesn't fall over. And they're talking about testing that on the next flight. That's a huge part of their reusability idea. It's a huge part of what they want to do to be able to launch these things very regularly and things like that. It's a hugely dangerous thing to do. Landing a rocket from space right next to a metal skyscraper is not for the faint-hearted. And frankly, I imagine that they're going to have some issues because that skyscraper isn't in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of a nature preserve only a few kilometers away from South Padre Island, which is a really nice tourist place and full of people at this time of the year. So we'll have to see if that actually happens. I'm of 2 minds about this. I mean, I really like the boldness and the idea of, yes, we don't want to just build a rocket to do what we want to do today. We want to take humans to the stars and all of that stuff. Great. But none of this is going to help the fact that they're supposed to land people on the moon 2 years from now. I mean, you don't need your Starship to come back to the Earth if you're landing on the moon. People don't ride it home. You don't need it to land and reuse the booster to be able to land on the moon. They're focusing on all the things that they want to do for their own projects, and they're completely ignoring the fact that they have to take astronauts to the moon on Artemis 3. The very next mission after Jeremy is supposed to land on the moon with a Starship human landing system that doesn't exist except this rendering here. And I did learn recently that, so there's an elevator that takes people on the outside from the hatch up here, the 70 feet or whatever to the moon. You'll notice how flat the moon looks in this particular rendering. That's not what the real moon looks like. So this whole, I said that I didn't think that Starship would be landing people on the moon. And some people said that's very pessimistic. I agree. I don't know though. I just don't see that they're even trying to make any of the schedules that NASA has set. So what does that mean for the Artemis missions? I mean, if we aren't landing people on the moon on Artemis 3, what are we doing? Is Artemis 3 getting delayed? Now there's another company building a landing system. They'll be building it for Artemis 4. Do we just go with them? Again, this is a reason why you have more than one company involved, because if it's not NASA doing it where they can oversee and basically make sure that things happen properly, you're leaving it to private companies who you can't tell them what to do, essentially. So we'll see how all the Starship stuff plays out. It's a little bit disheartening, though, all the stuff that is going on with Starship in terms of, it's like they've forgotten about the Artemis program entirely and they're just doing their own thing. So, like I say, we'll have to see what happens. Lots of exciting things in space, lots of things to watch for. Always exciting to see these rockets launch and land and things like that. And it'll be even more exciting when we see Jeremy Hansen go up there on his mission just a little bit more than a year from now. So Canada in space. Oh, and of course, Josh Kutrick, Canadian astronaut, will be flying the next Starliner mission. Starliner 1. Assuming that they solve all the problems with Starliner and that it's certified for flight, he'll be flying on the very next one and then going up to the International Space Station for 6 months. So we'll have a Canadian in space for 6 months. Okay, we have a little bit of time left, and I want to get to the Perseid meteor shower here. There's a little bit more cool space stuff, but we'll skip that for now. Krish in Texas is asking, what's the best night to observe the Perseid meteor shower? The Perseid meteor shower is a wonderful annual event that often disappoints people because the Perseid meteor shower is the Earth going through a dust bunny in space. There's a cloud of material left behind by a comet, and as the Earth goes through that cloud at the same time every year as we go around the sun, each piece of dust hits the atmosphere, burns up due to the friction, and we see that flash of light as a falling star, a shooting star, a meteor, whatever you want to call it. Meteor is the preferred scientific term. You can see meteors any night. There's a few of them hitting the Earth any night, but the odds of you seeing it are pretty low. You might see a handful an hour if you're really watching the sky carefully from a dark location. But if you go out on a meteor shower night, like the Perseid meteor shower, you kind of expect a shower of meteors, right? Astronomers are terrible at naming things. A meteor shower means instead of 3 meteors per hour, you might see 10 or 20 or 30 meteors per hour, one every 2 minutes. That seems okay, but it's still not a shower as far as most people are concerned. And the Perseids, and actually many meteor showers, are also best at a certain time of the night, and it's not when you want to go out. People go out, they stay up late and they go out and they watch the Perseid meteor shower, and they're out at dark, so 10:30, and they're watching the sky and they see almost no meteors. They see a handful of meteors, and then they pack it in at like 1:30 because it's late and they're tired. And they are disappointed because they didn't see very many meteors. Meteor showers are at the best. Oh, a meteor spritzing would be a better name. Thanks, Tiffany. I am stealing that. It is not a shower. There's an increase in the number of meteors. So the meteor spritzing, even the spritzing part, doesn't happen until the hours before dawn. The way that all this works, the Earth, being round, spins around like this, and it goes around the sun like this. When you're in the evening part, think of it like a car. You're driving in a snowstorm, and the snow is just falling down vertically, but you see way more snowflakes coming towards you out the front window because you're moving into them. If you're looking out the back, the snowflakes are moving away from you, and those would be invisible to us because in the case of a meteor, you only see the ones that are actually hitting the Earth, not the ones moving away from you. And if you look out the side windows, you see a few, but most of those are not hitting the car. They're just going past the car. So again, they'd be invisible. We're only looking through the front windshield of the car right before sunset. So the couple of hours before dawn is the time to watch the Perseid meteor shower. So like 4 a.m. If you go out at 4 a.m, the Perseid meteor shower is a pretty good meteor shower. If you go out in the evening, it isn't. I've been disappointed myself many times. Now, there are exceptions. If you go out in the evening, you might luck out, and while you'll see fewer meteors, they're often ones that are big and bright and go all the way across the sky and can be very dramatic. So I'm not saying don't go out. I'm saying temper your expectations. If you're going to go out all night, great. But if you're only going to go out for 2 hours, go out from 3 to 5 in the morning rather than from 11 to 1 in the morning. And that's not possible for everyone. I totally get that. So it's just the way the geometry works. Dale, perfect. That's exactly what I was going to say. They say up to 130 per hour. I think at best we counted 23 last year. So 130 per hour is what's called the ZHR, the zenithal hourly rate. That is, if you were in the part of the world where the direction the meteors are coming from, the front windshield was directly over your head. So you're in the perfect place in the world, and it's completely dark, and you are observing the sky with absolutely no breaks, like not even blinking, you could see 130 meteors per hour. And that's a useful number because for scientists, it tells us the density of the particle stream and how much stuff there is actually hitting the Earth. You won't see that. First of all, you blink. Second of all, even if you are the most dedicated observer, you will look away from the sky. Somebody will say something to you and you'll say, oh yeah, and then there'll be one that you miss. So you will absolutely miss some. But most importantly, you're never in a perfectly dark sky. That takes off a certain percentage of the meteors. And there are a lot more faint meteors than there are bright ones. So even if you only take off, say, 10%, you're taking off the bottom 10% of brightness. That's actually a lot of meteors. That might be half the meteors. So and then finally, there's one more thing. That radiance is never directly above our heads. For us, the front windshield is in the constellation Perseus. And let's just set our stellarium here for the appropriate date. Another way that stellarium is just fantastic is that it actually has meteor shower radiance in it. Let's get over to stellarium here, and I'll make sure I've got the meteor showers on. There's a whole bunch of meteor showers. Most of them are not even worth knowing about, even if you're very dedicated, because some of them are like literally 1 per hour. Don't even tell me about meteors that are 1 per hour. Okay, here's the Perseid meteor shower. That's where the meteors will appear to radiate from. This is Perseus, kind of a blob of stars. It kind of looks like a little bit of a fish hook here if you really are good. Here's the W of Cassiopeia. That's a little bit more useful. And down below here, we actually have Jupiter and Mars just rising on the morning of the 12th. This is about 1:30 in the morning. The radiant is not straight up overhead, it's down over there. So that means we're actually missing a bunch of the meteors because some of them are happening under the ground, under the horizon for us. I would say that if you see 23 meteors in an hour, that's a pretty good Perseid showing for middle of the night to like 2 in the morning. As the night goes on, as we get closer to dawn, the radiant rises higher. That windshield is more in our face, and we get to see a better view. The best view would be right at sunrise, because at sunrise, the zenith, the point directly above our head, is kind of heading directly into the meteor stream as much as possible. But of course, once the sun starts rising, the sky gets all bright blue. You can't see the fainter ones, so it works against it. So the best time to observe the Perseids is the morning of the 12th. And actually, stellarium will actually tell us how many meteors we are expected to see in our location. It did yesterday. Maybe I don't have all the information turned on. Here it's listing the ZHR as 100. I would say 30 per hour is probably a reasonable number. And again, get up in the morning. This is the sky at 4:30 facing east. Orion is rising already. Winter coming. In Taurus, we've got Jupiter and Mars right beside each other. Beautiful thing to look at with the Taurus, the Hyades star cluster, and the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters here. And up above that is where Perseus is. And the meteors, you don't have to look in that spot, because any meteors coming from that direction will be very short, and they sort of radiate out from that direction. So you actually probably want to look off towards the south, or whatever part of the sky is darkest, and that's where you'll see them moving across the sky. Meteor showers, though, are great to observe because you really have no equipment requirements. I mean, I like to bring a reclining lawn chair, because then I can lean back and be off the ground, so that if the dew comes out at 3 in the morning, you don't get cold. Bug spray, or whatever your favorite mosquito issue is, because that is definitely something that you have to watch for. But it's really easy to do and really fun. I'm going to try and get out for the Perseids. I'll probably go out in the evening anyway and just, socialize with folks. But then we can also, for those who want to stick around for the later parts, we'll probably do a Birds Hill night for that. So if you're interested in maybe coming along to an event like that where we do some observing, and of course, if you're local enough to make that work, just drop me an email through the main page here, which is space@manitobamuseum.ca. I'll put you on the list and make sure you hear about it. And it's just, basically it's me and a few friends and folks from Dome at Home and stuff like that. We'll just go out and watch the meteor shower. So let me know if you're into that, and we'll try and make that work. Hopefully we'll have some clear skies. We had a couple more questions here. Let's see. Oh, Tracy, yeah, driving through falling snow, the Millennium Falcon light speed effect. Yeah, that's pretty much it, hey? Especially at night where the headlights are lighting it up. That's what we're doing all the time. There's dust everywhere in space, and so the Earth is always getting hit by this stuff. I think the recent estimates were 10,000 tons of dust a day hit the Earth, which is massive, just massive. But it almost all burns up. Now, this is kind of cool. So the material burns up in the high upper atmosphere, and some of that material drifts down to the level where raindrops form in rainstorms. And so often the little nucleus that water starts condensing around to form a raindrop is actually a little piece of a meteorite, a micrometeorite. If you were cleaning out your eaves in a house, run a magnet, put a magnet in a Ziploc bag or something and run it along the bottom there. And then if you have a magnifying glass, or better yet, a microscope or one of those things you stick on your phone to magnify things, take a look at the magnet. You'll probably find little metal particles in there. Now, some of them will be metal particles from like car exhaust and pollution and stuff like that. But there very well may be nice, perfectly round little spherules that are meteorites. You can pick that up from your eaves troughs, which is way less expensive than flying into space to collect space particles. You can just pick them up off the ground here. Okay. Oh, hey, Kevin. Nice to see you at the... Oh, yeah. For those of you that aren't here in Manitoba, the Fringe Fest is on right now. Lots of really cool stuff going on. And so it's a great time for festival stuff. Coming up, the first Friday of every month, the museum is always open in the evening. So from 5 till 9 o'clock on August the 2nd, so a week from now, we'll be open in the evening, and it's free. We're open during the day sort of as a regular thing, but from 5 till 9, things will be free. I'll be there. We're running a program called The Science of Star Wars. As some of you will know, the first version of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, in Anishinaabewan language is being released, and we're celebrating that with some Star Wars stuff over the next few months at the museum. So that's kind of cool. And you can always come and see the show. We would love to see your pictures, your stories, your observing notes, and things like that from anything you do astronomy-wise or space-wise over the next little while. Please send them in to us here at the museum, and we'll ask you if we can put them on the show. And we're looking forward to... Melissa's asking, what's the name of the Hallmark film? I don't know the one we just shot, but I will find out, and I'll post that on the museum's page. It wasn't all in the planetarium, this one, but if you search Hallmark Planetarium, there was a movie shot where I think it was Love in the Stars or something like that. That was all shot in our planetarium here, so it's kind of fun to see our theater in a big Hollywood production. So that's something you can look for as well. We're way over time, but it was a lot of fun hanging out with you guys. So thanks for joining us. We will be back the last Thursday of August, and we will be doing a live stream of the Perseids, and we'll be doing an in-person viewing of the Perseids, of course, weather permitting. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great time. Try and get out under the stars. The stars belong to everyone, and summer's a great time to get away from the city if you can, and get a good dark view. Take in a dark sky preserve if you can, and keep the folks of Jasper and other areas that are fire affected in your thoughts. Thanks again. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you soon. Good night.